There are strong connections between werewolves and witchcraft. For centuries, the mythologies of werewolves and witchcraft have captivated the human imagination, emerging from the depths of folklore and superstition. Both concepts represent transformative powers that defy the natural order, challenging societal norms and embodying primal fears of the unknown. Throughout history, these supernatural elements have become increasingly intertwined, creating a complex tapestry of beliefs that reveal much about human psychology and cultural anxieties. This video explores the nature of werewolves and witchcraft separately, before examining their connections and how beliefs about their relationship have evolved across different cultures and time periods. Werewolves, creatures of dual nature, represent one of humanity's oldest and most persistent supernatural fears, the beast within man, unleashed. These shapeshifters traditionally transform from human to wolf form during the full moon, losing all sense of human rationality and moral restraint in the process. The werewolf myth captures the eternal struggle between civilization and wilderness, reason and instinct, appearing in various guises across numerous cultures from ancient Greece to medieval Europe and beyond. In most traditions, the werewolf transformation is portrayed as a curse or punishment, inflicted either through witchcraft, divine retribution, or hereditary transmission, resulting in a monster driven by bloodlust and savagery. Witchcraft, by contrast, represents the deliberate harnessing of supernatural powers through occult knowledge and practices. Traditional conceptions of witchcraft involve individuals, predominantly women, who establish pacts with malevolent forces to gain abilities beyond normal human capability. These powers typically included healing, divination, cursing enemies, controlling weather, communicating with spirits, and most relevant to our discussion, transformation of self and others. Witchcraft beliefs evolved from ancient pagan practices and folk magic, but were gradually demonized with the rise of Christianity, leading to the violent persecutions that marked the early modern period in Europe and colonial America. Throughout folklore and superstition, few connections between supernatural entities have been as persistent as the belief that witches could create werewolves through curses. This sinister intersection of two feared figures embodies humanity's ancient concerns about power, transformation, and retribution. The idea that a witch could condemn someone to a cyclical, bestial transformation represented one of the most dreaded manifestations of magical power in European folklore, capturing the imagination of peasants and scholars alike across centuries of superstition. The witch's lycanthropic curse typically followed a pattern established in medieval and early modern folk beliefs. A witch, having mastered forbidden arts through diabolical pacts or ancient knowledge, would pronounce a carefully crafted incantation against someone who had offended or wronged her. Unlike simpler hexes causing illness or misfortune, the werewolf curse was considered particularly sophisticated magic, requiring exceptional power, often involving complex rituals performed during specific lunar phases. Victims would find themselves transformed during full moons, losing human reason, and assuming the predatory nature of wolves while retaining enough human consciousness to be tormented by awareness of their condition. The motivations attributed to witches for casting such curses reflected the complex social dynamics of communities where these beliefs flourished. Revenge stood as the primary motivation, with werewolf curses serving as punishment for those who had rejected a witch's advances, testified against her in court, or refused to provide assistance when requested. Some accounts suggested more capricious reasons: the testing of newly acquired powers, demonstrations of magical prowess to impress demonic patrons, or simply the cruel enjoyment of causing suffering. These narratives reinforced the perception of witches as vindictive figures whose power threatened social harmony and justified the persecution of suspected practitioners. The methods of werewolf curse casting varied widely across European traditions, but typically involved specific components thought to bridge human and animal natures. Witches were believed to create magical salves containing herbs like wolfsbane, belladonna, and hemlock, mixed with fat rendered from unbaptized infants or executed criminals. Some traditions held that a witch might fashion an enchanted belt or girdle from human skin that, when worn, would trigger the transformation. Others described elaborate rituals where victims were forced to drink from wolf footprints filled with water or consume food over which transformative spells had been cast. These methods reflected a sympathetic magical logic, creating connections between human and wolf through substances believed to contain transformative essence. The witch-created werewolf occupied a unique position in supernatural hierarchies, distinct from those who became werewolves through other means. Unlike hereditary werewolves or those who had willingly sought transformation through magical means, the cursed werewolf was viewed primarily as a victim rather than a willing participant in evil. This victim status created moral ambiguity, as communities sometimes recognized the cursed individual's essential innocence despite their dangerous transformed state. Court records from werewolf trials occasionally note distinctions between willing and unwilling transformations, with cursed individuals sometimes receiving more lenient punishment based on their lack of consent to their condition. The connection between werewolves and witchcraft began to solidify during the late medieval and early modern periods in Europe, when both were increasingly viewed as manifestations of diabolical influence. Werewolves were often believed to be created through witchcraft, either as self-transformation or as a curse cast upon others. The witch trials of the 16th and 17th centuries produced numerous confessions, extracted under torture, of witches transforming themselves or others into wolves to commit heinous acts. The infamous Werewolf of Bedburg, Peter Stubb, executed in 1589, was accused of making a pact with the devil to transform into a wolf, combining elements of both witchcraft and lycanthropy in one terrifying case. Central to the connection between these phenomena was the concept of the Sabbat, or witches' gathering. European witch hunters believed that witches regularly met in remote locations to worship Satan, engage in orgies, and transform into animals, often wolves, to commit acts of cannibalism and infanticide. The 1598 werewolf trial of Jacques Roulet in France exemplifies this fusion, as he was believed to have transformed into a wolf through witchcraft to devour children, reflecting the period's obsession with both diabolical pacts and bestial transformation. These beliefs were further codified in influential demonological works, like the Malleus Maleficarum, which explicitly linked shapeshifting to satanic witchcraft. The evolution of beliefs concerning werewolves and witchcraft reflects broader cultural and intellectual changes throughout history. In pre-Christian Europe, both shapeshifting and magic were often viewed as amoral forces that could be either beneficial or harmful depending on their use. With Christianization, both concepts became increasingly associated with evil and demonic influence, reaching their most sinister portrayal during the witch hunt era. The Enlightenment period challenged these supernatural beliefs, reinterpreting werewolf accounts as cases of mental illness, criminal behavior, or mass hysteria, while witchcraft was increasingly viewed through the lens of religious persecution and social control rather than genuine occult power. Modern interpretations have further transformed these connections, often reclaiming and reimagining both concepts in more nuanced ways. Contemporary paganism and Wicca have reclaimed witchcraft as a positive spiritual practice disconnected from diabolism, while popular culture has reimagined werewolves as tragic heroes rather than mindless beasts. Films, literature, and television frequently portray werewolves and witches as allies, or even as different manifestations of the same magical heritage, with witches often possessing the knowledge to control or cure lycanthropy. This evolution reflects modern society's tendency to sympathize with outcasts and to find psychological depth in what were once considered mere monsters. In folklore studies and anthropology, the connection between werewolves and witchcraft has been reinterpreted as reflections of social anxieties about power, identity, and transgression. Both represent individuals who cross boundaries between human and animal, between natural and supernatural, making them perfect vehicles for exploring taboos and social fears. Feminist scholars have particularly noted how both werewolf and witch accusations disproportionately targeted women who defied social norms, revealing deeper patterns of gender-based persecution. These interpretations suggest that the historical connection between werewolves and witchcraft was less about supernatural reality and more about societal mechanisms for controlling perceived deviance. The folkloric and anthropological connections between werewolves and witchcraft also reveal intriguing cross-cultural patterns. While European traditions emphasized the diabolical aspects, Many non-Western cultures viewed shapeshifting and magical practices as potentially neutral or even positive forces. Native American skinwalker traditions, African leopard men societies, and Norse berserker practices all incorporated elements recognizable as werewolf-like, while simultaneously embracing forms of spiritual power that Europeans might have classified as witchcraft. These traditions often lacked the sharp moral dualism that characterized European views, instead seeing transformation and power as aspects of a more complex spiritual ecology. The relationship between werewolves and witchcraft reveals a profound connection rooted in humanity's fears of transformation and power beyond normal human boundaries. From their separate origins in ancient folklore, these concepts gradually merged in the collective imagination to represent different aspects of supernatural transgression. The witch as the wielder of forbidden knowledge and the werewolf as the embodiment of untamed nature. Their evolution from feared monsters to complex symbols reflects changing social attitudes toward power, nature, and the concept of the other. Today, both witches and werewolves continue to captivate our imagination, not merely as supernatural threats, but as powerful metaphors for the transformative potential within humanity itself, reminding us that the line between human and monster, between civilization and wilderness, has always been more permeable than we might wish to believe.